Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
Our guest today is Mr. Jim Groesbeck. He has started out packing in California, Sierra Nevadas in his 20s. He went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in animal science and horseshoeing, where he met Gene Hunt, who gave him Ray's book and introduced him to Ray. He wanted to train horses, but somehow wound up working mostly with mules. He did wind up being a champion working cow horse mules at the Bishop Mule Day several years in a row. He finally met Ray and went to a bunch of Ray's clinics. He started breaking thoroughbreds for the track and become a traveling colt starter. He wound up working under Gary Balmer cow horses and then Jack Adams cutting horses, and even went with Jack to Paisley, Oregon and the ZX Ranch. He's trained Arabian cow horses for a while and has been the champion at the Scottsdale shows. He even had Ray out to his ranch to do multiple clinics, and Ray was a big inspiration. He eventually started getting a lot of dressage jumping horses to ride and made several bridle horses under the California tradition, even winning the 96 Snaffle Bit Futurity. He is now a division.
I won a division.
Won a division.
Yeah, that's important.
96. Sorry, I missed the word right there.
Amateur. I won an amateur division at the California at the Snaffle Bit Futurity. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now he's predominantly training working equitation horses, working with Lusitanos and doing classical dressage, studying the Portuguese style combined with older German and French military dressage. So Jim Groesbeck, you've been a person I've kind of been following and chatting with on Facebook for a while, and it's been quite evident that you know your stuff. And so I wanted to have you on and have a chat with you. I think it'd be a pretty interesting conversation today. So thanks for coming on.
That introduction made me tired. I go, oh shoot, that was a lot of stuff. Oh, that was Gene. One more correction. That was Gene Armstrong, who was the head of the farrier shop at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Okay, all right.
Gene Armstrong, I think, is still one of the instructors of the American Farrier Association.
Okay.
Hell of a hand. Good. Yeah.
And Cal
I had
Poly
to clear that up.
Sure. Cal Poly's got a pretty big history of making that's where high-low syndrome and a lot of that other stuff was developed out there, I believe, or at UC Davis out that way.
A lot of
anyway.
Yeah, and I had to clear. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I had to clear that up with the snaffle bit because boy, they'll like that's a big claim.
Yeah,
there was a division called the amateur division at the time, which they don't have anymore. It was if you won less than so many $1,000.
Sure.
And so it wasn't really amateur. You could be a pro. So they had to change the name. Anyway, I won that.
Now that's the limited division, I believe.
It is limited, or
anyway. Usually one less than 50,000 or so. Of course, that's in 1990 dollars. Now you could win less than 200,000. It'd be the same amount of money as 50,000 used to be, right? So, anyway,
this is correct.
Okay. All right. Well, Jim, we start everybody off with the lightning round questions, and these are for points and prizes. So you want to be on your A game here. All right.
Okay.
If you were a Jedi, what % chance would there be that you'd use the Force inappropriately?
If I was a Jedi, what % chance if I'd use the Force? Probably every other day.
Fair enough. Morning?
Honest, yeah.
Morning or evening?
Morning or evening would I use it inappropriately?
No. Just that's the second question. Are you more of a morning person or an evening person?
Morning.
Bay or sorrel?
Bay.
That is one of, I keep saying that every
Wrong,
time
wrong
somebody answers,
answer.
but I thought that's one of those questions that'd be like 50-50, and I just throw it out there and take up space. It's like 90% people picking bay horses now. I had no idea that people preferred bay horses
I,
that
I
much.
worked around a I worked around a fella named Mike McDowell. I'm old enough to know some older people know these names. He said bay is God's chosen color for a horse. That's what he said. That
Okay.
stuck in.
Dogs or cats?
If it's got hair, it used to be if it had hair on it, I could ride it anyway. So it's okay.
So dogs or
Okay.
cats?
Dog.
Do you have a favorite
I like
breed?
them both.
Okay. You have a favorite breed of dog?
A dog. Uh, I like Queenslands,
Okay.
but they're too much work for me. I have had more Queenslands than Australian Shepherds.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes, I can eat it. It's just fine with me.
If there are good essential oils, do you think that it's fair to say there must also be evil essential oils?
Uh, yeah, yeah, I think there are.
And you can expand on this one. I know we've been talking a
Tequila
little
might
while
be
already.
one of them.
Tequila, that's good stuff.
Yeah, that might be one of
You ever keep a bottle of tequila in the freezer and drink it really, really cold like that? That is the way to go with
them.
tequila. Oh, it's
Oh, is that it?
oh
Okay.
mess. Keep that bottle in the
Yeah.
freezer and just pour you out a glass of it, and that's life-changing advice right there. Do you have an industry-related pet peeve?
Well, you've heard some of them. Yes, I do. I have a list. So we could talk about those later.
Sure. If I have a sneaking suspicion, I know the answer to this one too. If you had to fool with a horse that was completely wild or very, very spoiled, which one would you pick?
Wild.
Would you tell us something unexpected about you?
I don't know. I I kind of lived on a hippie commune when I was a teenager.
Okay.
That's pretty unexpected, huh?
A little bit, yeah. Got the cowboy hippie thing there.
Yeah, as a cow, yeah. I actually where I started with horses, so bareback.
Okay. If you could choose any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
Hmm. Ray Hunt superpower?
Okay. Thoughts
You see, you
or
seem to
feelings?
have one.
He
Okay,
did.
go ahead.
Uh,
Yeah.
thoughts or feelings?
Thoughts or feelings?
Are you more of a
Thoughts.
cerebral type of a guy, or yeah?
Yeah.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
Evidently, I'm indecisive because I had to think about that. So I think the answer is indecisive because the decisive answer would have been I'm decisive. So yeah.
That's another one of the I've had several people now tell me decisively right away that they're indecisive. I've had indecisive people make me edit out 2 minutes worth of pause. So for an indecisive person, that was a very short pause, actually. That you actually that's a very revealing question. I had no idea when I
I,
made that
I
one.
I tend to consider things and then act. But every
Well,
now and then I'm impulsive and it always gets me in trouble. So
there you go.
sometimes I could be decisive, but I would say it's not always the wrong action. Right action. Yeah.
What is the best smell in the barn?
The best smell in the barn? Horses. Well, that's a sound. Smell of hay.
Do you have a favorite book or movie?
Several, but if I went by genres, I'd have to say Jeremiah Johnson. I think I've watched 14 times, probably. So if that's not exactly Western, Tombstone's up there too.
That may have more one-liners in it than any other movie ever made. Yep. Sweet, salty, or spicy?
Sweet. Hear it? Sweet.
Sweet. Okay. Do you have a favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
When I was a kid, I liked the brontosaurus.
All right. You're the first brontosaurus answer I've had.
I'm the first brontosaurus. Okay, there we go.
We had a stegosaurus, but that's the first brontosaurus. So I just figured once you're an adult, no one ever asks you what your favorite dinosaur is anymore. So I thought I would throw that
I
one
had
in
like
there.
a box full of toy dinosaurs.
The final question, have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. Well, Jim, I've tabulated your score here, and you have scored 1,356 points, which makes you our reigning high scorer of the game of all time. And that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment. Your choice.
How about the awkward silence? That's I can handle that better. Yeah. I don't need a compliment. And here comes the awkward silence. Can I change my answer?
No, that's good. I'll leave it at that. I love a good awkward
I don't
silence.
like the awkward silence anymore.
Well,
all right. That's pretty funny.
Well, Jim, thank you for coming on. I'm tickled to finally get to talk with you this in depth and everything. Would you, I read a little bit of your bio, but would you kind of give us the 30,000 foot view of what it is that you do in the horse world?
I'll start at this end, huh?
Sure. Yeah.
What I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I've just now, I sort of came across a bunch of Lusitanos that most of them belong to the same owner. But about 5 years ago, it started with these Aztecas. And what's an Azteca? Somebody shows me a video of some working equitation. Okay, so I trained those, some Garocha pole stuff. Then I was working privately for a guy, but just in the last couple of years, I always want to ride one of these Lusitanos. They look very cool. And lo and behold, they just showed up in my lap. And so that was about a year and a half ago. And suddenly, like every client I have, except for one, which is a quarter horse, is a Lusitano. So my learning curve had to be, since, I was involved with knew a lot of people getting working equitation in this country started. And I wasn't even really interested, but it was like, I want to work cows. I want to be a cowboy. But these horses came this way. And then I see this, for lack of a better word, classical dressage. Watch the Portuguese of these beautiful Lusitanos. Anybody can go on YouTube and see some of this stuff. And it's just, so I kind of went, I want to know how to do that. So that's what I've been studying now. And boy, I thought I knew something, but it's made me want to because the working equitation, you have the 3 events, but the dressage event's pretty important to your overall score. And I was doing it with my little bridle horse, but that's kind of been there, done that. So I see these Portuguese guy and the way they train, and that's really that's the direction I'm in now. So,
Yep.
but there's a whole history behind that I'm glad I had a whole lot of experience that I can take with me. Because, with the colt breaking and when I was young, I rode anything with hair on it, like a lot of guys. I wasn't like great at, I got bucked off plenty, but it didn't bother me. Now it hurts and I get broken. So in fact, I don't start very many colts at all. I got a gal who's pretty good. She's a student of mine, and I help her with the first few rides if I get a colt in. But this year, first year I ever turned down colt. Because the phone would ring, hey, I got this blah blah blah, and I need to do 60 days, 30 days, and yeah, sure, but yeah, that's changed. But I'm not necessarily a breed guy, but the Lusitanos right now, they just offer, it's actually helping train other kinds of horses. So that's where I'm at now, the working equitation mostly. And I never thought I'd be concentrated on it, but now it seems I'm a working equitation trainer.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew that would happen?
Well, it does. It's a pretty cool event. I wish there was some of it closer to me, because I definitely looks like something I would enjoy and appreciate.
That's a big issue, but the thing is, like in Portugal, they only have one level, master's level. And this ring, okay, we could go back to pet peeves a little bit, but when you look at their training, it's backed up by several centuries all through Europe, not just to Portugal, Spain, France, and Germany, and Hungary, and England. Centuries of this stuff. We've got what? We moved to this country and we had to break our own horses. And in California, they were the Vaqueros, Spanish horses, so they say, and all this. But basically, we're self-taught. And, they weren't breaking wild horses over there, so we got pretty rough and tough. So one Portuguese guy that's told me this, he said it several times, because when he started coming over, he goes, you American cowboys, he goes, I've been all over the world. You guys are the best young horse, problem horse, colt starters anywhere in the world. He says, it's phenomenal what you've done. Thinking of Ray Hunt and wild horses and this and that. He says, but you don't know how to finish one. You don't know how to train one. And he was serious. So I'm watching these videos. So these kids grow up with horses that know tempi changes, that know piaffe, that know passage, that know that they're super broke. And you see these little kids at 12 competing on these horses because they have older schoolmasters. We don't have those horses here. We make them our own, and we're making shit up. And that's why I've sort of steered away a lot of the people. I thought, God, look, bridle horse, and that guy does this. I mean, we have our own events, and I think I'm not one to criticize their cow horses, because I love rank cow horses. And that's sort of real particular to us in the way we work cattle. They just, they have bullfighting, or the way they work cattle is totally different. Mm-hmm. And so there's things we have that we came up with that are pretty good that I wouldn't give up. But when it comes to that higher education of the horse, you have to go to Europe. You really do. And Americans have just dumb everything down. I hate to sound European and criticize it, but the more I look into it, it's unfortunately true. And not that everybody's great over there either. In fact, you have to be careful, because there's some of the trainers that come here that have an accent. There's a reason they're here, because they probably got kicked out over there, right? We're riding, and it's true with the Andalusians. We're riding all the rejects. They got the good ones. Is that, let's send these guys over to the Americans because they don't know the difference, that kind of thing. Anyway, so, and a lot of these Lusitanos are imported. I don't. Otherwise, I'm pretty still ignorant about. I don't know any of the bloodlines except there's Dago horses and there's bullfighting lines and there's more dressage lines, but and it's not that you can't do it on a quarter horse. You can do working equitation on a quarter horse, but at the very very top, I mean, the Portuguese people invented the sport, so it's like us inventing. You can train any horse to be a cow horse, but I'm not sure you're going to go into the rank horse industry on anything but a quarter horse these days.
Yeah,
you think right? You know what I mean?
I think that build has a lot to do with it. Those taller, warm blood-esque type horses, their moment of suspension just gives them enough time to do lead changes and things like that flawlessly. And our little quick-footed, low-to-the-ground quarter horses can do it, but it's choppier. It's not nearly as smooth and fluid as those big horses. There's pros and cons to everything. If you're gonna, you also notice
pick a.
Yeah, those big horses, like those Lusitanos, when you watch them do their stops, it's not the same kind of stop that these quarter horses do. I mean, everything has a give and a take to it.
They don't ask them to. You see, again, I'm not an expert on it. The Doma Vaquero stuff is they do some stops. I've been told that in the last 10 years or so, they've imported some reining horse guys over there to teach them how to get their horses to stop better. Mm-hmm. But working equitation, you don't. Here's the thing: I was pretty good at teaching a horse to stop, right? I thought I was good. So, canter, collected canter, halt, canter, square halt, all 4 feet. You know how freaking hard that is? And everybody, so to me, it was like, oh shit! Look, I can stop a horse. Watch this, and then you go, but try that. Go absolutely straight, and then you go, oh, there's more to this shit than I thought, because there's a lot, So there's a lot to sliding a horse, but
we'll see. Like, this is. I want to get into some of this stuff with you because I think
training,
you have some of that unique perspective. So, like, to me, one of the most important aspects of a stop is that the horse finishes it ready to do whatever. And so I have a cutting horse background, and those horses stop, but they stay squatted. So it's like a loaded gun that's cocked and ready to pull the trigger in any direction. Like with the Lusitanos, and when you see them stop, your canter stop, they stand back up. And they have lost all the coiling of the spring. If they're now going to roll back or something, they have to recoil the spring in order to do it. So that ability to hold is kind of what tends to be missing there, I would say.
I'll answer that this way, because that appears to be the case in some kind. But if you follow the classical advice, I got some here, but I won't. I'm just thinking of a few. And the training I'm getting is that what's really desired is, it's just exactly what you said when you said about the cutting horse. The desire to carry that power is built up in that ass, those ass muscles, and it's ready to go. That's exactly what they want in a halt. It's not just turning everything off. And you don't see it in a lot of horses. When that horse is halted, that moment he can go. He's not jumping out of his tracks like the cutting, because the cutting horse got to get across himself over the other way. But the principle is the same. So those horses, they're all that. So it comes back to a definition of collection. But part of a definition of collection is, and it's very similar to what you said about the cutting horse, is that there is that desire, even in the halt, to carry forward and push and go. And a lot of the gymnastic exercises develop that push. It's kind of what the Piaffe teaches. They don't ever work cattle like we did. And so we have the American cutting horse. I mean, we kind of invented that, right? So it's a different animal. But I tend to try to find things that are connected rather than disconnected. or similar rather than dissimilar. But what you said about that power being in the hind end, that's what's supposed to happen in good dressage horse. That's what's actually supposed to be available to you at the halt. So if that horse canters in and halts and he's square, it may look like he's stand back up, but if he's been trained right, you just go and off he goes. Of course, it's forward. He doesn't have to go that way, But the Lusitanos have that power too. They're very powerful behind. And you watch the Merlin the bullfighting horses. Watch, their thing. So I like what you said because I can apply it in those classical terms because it ties some things together. There's just a disconnect between what people think they see. It's like American dressage or bad dressage or whatever. Because you ought to be, that's why I like to work in equitation, because you have to take the basic dressage training and put it to work. And they have to work cows.
Yeah.
And of course, their cow working is sorting. So I like that topic because it's just been, I've never thought, I thought about it the same way you said. Well, of course, once the horse stops, he's not ready to go. No, that's the whole point of the training. The power of the hind, particularly, they even talk about the femoral coxal joint. People say, I want my horse on his hocks. No, you want him on his ass, particularly those muscles connected to the femur from his hip bone to his stifle. That's the piston. And all the real classical training. Otherwise, those horses could never evolve like in Pajaski, the Spanish riding school. But it's got a different application. But it's been a real eye-opener for me that while I'm riding, you're developing you're developing hind end engagement, and it's always forward. I think that's the biggest difference. Like the cutting horse, it's still forward, but he's got to turn and go that way. But all that push and you're right. He can push and he can sit. He has to, because if he does like the Vaquero, they have those loping turnarounds. Yeah. But the thing is, and they're pretty. But the thing is if you were a cutter, that the more time you spend in the air, the cow's there. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? They're up here making this turn, and it's a beautiful turn, but it's not quick. Yeah. They got to get the front end, and that's nowadays. Their nose is in the dirt because they're going. Not that other style won't work a cow, but not the cutting pen. So it's a little bit apples and oranges, but I try to make it apples and apples best I can in these discussions.
Yeah, like you were saying, finding commonality there. One of the things I do really appreciate about the working equitation is it has a practical side to it. Like you're talking about dressage and reining. To me, at least what we see in the modern day, both of those disciplines have lost all sight of practicality, and they've become their own thing for no reason other than to be their own thing.
It's almost exhibition riding in a way.
A modern reining horse that would be competitive, you watch them and they know when every maneuver is coming up. Everything is really well set up. There's no what I would call right now in those horses anymore. Everything has to be so well set up and groomed, and they've got a 15-foot side pass in their lead departures and all of that stuff, where like with the bullfighting horses, there's a reason for that horse to turn left right now. And when you put your leg on him, he's not going to delay 3 seconds, because if he does, you're fixing to get rammed by a pretty pissed off bull. And I think that is a lot of where the practicality of that comes from. The California Vaquero and the ropes and all, it developed out of necessity and the type of cattle that they had to work. Well, the Spanish and Portuguese cattle are no joke. A lot of people have never been around a true fighting bred animal, but they're coming to get you. You're not going to look at them from 100 yards away or whatever and, oh, look, there's the cows, and they run from you. Those things turn towards you, and here they come, and there's no bluff in them whatsoever. And so if that's the life you're going to lead and the
Your
horse you're going
life
to ride,
depends.
yeah, it better be pretty damn serious, and you better have control of that animal, and the necessities of that world are exist for a reason.
Well, and you really appreciate a horse when he got you out of the bind and your life literally depended on it. And that could happen in the mountains, and it can happen, with the cow or a deer, or roping. Let's say you ever get a rim fired with a rope, and the horse gets you out of that mess. He probably saved your life. But the back to the working equitation, it's their version. It's their ranchos. They come out of the rancho, but they got to. I don't know. They're not big on trotting. It's cantering everywhere, which we don't do. But yeah, the horse you have to put the dressage to work, and it's a little bit like I said, stock horse pattern used to be dry work. The reining came out of dry work. It was no cattle. You did a dry pattern because the pattern was supposed to describe. It was like a figure skating test. They don't show that in Olympic figure skating because it used to be what did they call them? The word won't come to me. But it was required that they do the figures. It's very boring. And they have to do these exact figures here and then skate. And, they used to show it on TV and they don't. So the rein and pat was a little bit like, did you train your horse correctly for what he's about to do, which is work a cow? So a lot of the fairs and stuff, even when I was doing it in the 80s, it was still dry work. It was still called, and we were still doing it in California in Ramel reins. And I remember it was in the 80s where we started getting these videotapes from the East Coast of these guys in split reins, and we're like, what are these guys doing? Some of it blended over, and I think it's made, you were talking about the futurity horses being, back in the 70s, not looking so shiny. And some of it, like the hesitations, they keep horses being able to get shown a lot more because those horses, you stopped, you went right into a turnaround, right? And those horses I tried to show that way for it. They got jacked up big time. It was very hard to keep showing them. And then you had to school. So they wouldn't just, you go to turn around. It took a lot of skill, but yeah, that's the way. There was no hesitation. And now the working cow patterns are all hesitation. And they got 4 spins, some of them.
Yes.
For a while it was a spin and a half.
I've never found a cow that could run around me that quick, but anyway.
But anyway, so the dressage, if you look at the dressage portion of working equitation, it's the schooling figures, compulsory. That's what they call it. So it's like, is the training correct? And then the obstacle course is judged pretty much the same way. But the thing is, then they add the speed round. And then it's like, it's not quite a free for all. Go as fast as you can. Don't knock anything over and don't go off course. So that adds that other element, because can you imagine some dressage queens with their horses they say, I'm not going to ruin my horse. Well, a lot of reiners are like, they say, I'm not going to let them look at a cow. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, so I like the blend of it. And, but the one Lusitano I was showing, and we did have a cow class where it's more like team sorting. But what was the movements went. So I did a few cows. So I had to kind of retrain him real quick. Like you would have cut it back over your hocks, get over there, stop, back over your hock, get over there, get him. So just sort of, good Lord, he was like a bullfighting horse in there, because I was helping people whose cattle were getting away. I wasn't being judged. That's the way they do it. You have 4-man team, and one guy is putting a cow overline into a pen, and the other team can help him keep those cattle from crossing the line. But usually the team, nobody's got any control.
So it's like
But I had fun with cows getting, because I could just gallop across that pen like I was going down the fence. I'm telling you what, this sucker was like cow horse. So you just have, all you have to do is tweak your training a little bit. You've got a working cow horse. It's pretty cool. So anyway, and incidentally, at that same event, there was some real bridle horse enthusiasts on, I don't know, they were on half Lusitanos or something, but they had, that's, yeah, it was just the Vaquero thing. And those horses, I hate to say it, they couldn't do shit. And that's where you just go, yeah, the emperor has no clothes.
There's a few things out there that really do some separating, and one of them is adding speed to stuff. I've seen some of the Vaquero guys that kind of like reining when everything stays slow and controlled. It all looks pretty nice, but if it gets bumped up about 15% faster, the wheels start to vibrate and kind of come off a little bit. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, like I really think that people tend to underplay the genetic side of this stuff. So like what we were talking about earlier, when your life depended on it, well, all of a sudden culling horses becomes pretty damn important, because it's not that I don't enjoy that big gelding. It's that son of a bitch almost got me killed 3 times last month and he's gone. We're not trying him again or whatever. And so the culling process becomes real serious at those levels. And I think one of the things that diverged in the stock horse world was that you do have certain bloodlines of horses that are more the cow horse type, and they tend to be fairly independent minded. And that's great when you need them to go fight a cow for you. It's not so great when you want to do something boring like dry work. They tend to get pretty aggravated with that. And we've done this whole pattern 5 times and I'm done with it now. And then you have horses that do tolerate that really well. And I think those kind of became the reining horses. And then the cow horse bloodlines sort of started going their own way. And I'm sure, like in dressage, if we think of the German school and the French school we were talking about earlier, well, the Germans tended to be riding more drafty, cold-blooded horses that you needed to manhandle a little bit more, and the French tended to be riding more thoroughbred, hotter-blooded, more refined horses that if you manhandled too much, you were fixing to create a basket case. And so some of these attributes we give to these schools, I think, have more to do with the horses that they were riding and the genetics that they had necessarily over they had different goals or anything like that.
That's got to be true. I know with the warm bloods, it all changed after the war because they had all those wagon cannon horses, those big draft horses, and then they bred them to their third. They come up with the warm blood, but that didn't really that work. They had, I don't know much about the European bloodlines at all, but what they call a warm blood now is very different than what. And that's back where I was saying about the French school, not at one point wasn't that different than the German school because they were riding similar horses. But that changed after the war, from what I've been told. And the warm bloods changed. But you can take the Andalusians. There was no such thing as an Andalusian. We have an Andalusian registry in this country, but they're PREs over there, Pura Raza Españolas. They had 2 bloodlines, and one was evidently like the cart. So those are the ones they sold to us that got Andalusian started here, and that's why you see such giant shoulders, giant ass. They don't move very well. Now it's different now. We got better. We got the PREs finally, but in the quarter horses, I mean, now it's selective breeding, it's specialized, and trainers are now horse pickers rather than trainers. This is what one thing Bobby Ingersoll told me, and I always liked it. He says, we used to have to train horses to stop. We actually had to know how to train them to stop. He's training Arabians, and that's where I remember another guy, Walter Wright, he told me, one thing you need to know how to teach a horse to stop is to know where up is. Because maybe they weren't, he was talking about the up of that stride. Oh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't dealing with the bloodlines they have now that people are picking. And even then, even these guys who are winning the world and they got 40 horses in their barn, there's a reason they don't show up with 40 at the show.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
Because even among all those bloodlines you're talking about, it takes a freak individual. So this is just true in the horse world, I think. I think in the warm blood, in the dressage world, it's the same. They got they're what they call leg movers, but they accentuated the trot, and you got these horses with these crazy trot, but they're canter sucks or something, So it just comes down to, I'm more interested in like kind of good old fashioned training and riding, because I just want to be somewhere in the middle of just doing the art and correctly and knowledgeably. Whatever horse I'm riding to the best. And a lot of the principles talk about, like you're riding a horse built like a wheelbarrow. If that's the horse you got, there's a way to get him uphill. You kind of have to train him. He won't be as good as a horse that's already built uphill, and maybe he should go do a different event, but like you say, the cutters, I mean, they've talked about that for years, because now whether that's training or complete genetics, because if you say he won't like being told what to do, but he'll like cows, so they never try. So they don't even care what lead they're on. No, they put them in front of a cow, and they're just great in front of a cow. So yeah, genetics is a big thing, but also it's sort of got to be training too. But who wants to do all that work? If a horse doesn't have the breeding, that's what you're saying, I think, to stick his ass in the ground. Well, it's a good exercise, and it might be a paycheck, but you're not going to win anything in your cutting pen, right? I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, yeah. I think it's kind of funny that you go find a trainer of any discipline and you start having a candid conversation like we're having, and they're always going to really appreciate the well-rounded horse that can kind of do it all. And yet when we actually go to work, we're searching for the freak that is the genetic anomaly on the far end of the spectrum. And that's the horse that brings all of the money. Everybody wants the well-rounded horse, but nobody pays top dollar. That horse doesn't excel. I don't understand it. Like, there isn't real appreciation for that horse when it comes down to dollars,
Yeah. And it comes down to ego too, because we all want that horse going to make us look fantastic. But I'm at the other end of my, I'm not trying to make a name for myself. Those days are long gone. I just want to do a good job, and I want to learn what I'm doing, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm blessed to have an owner that's what she wants to. She just wants what's best for a horse. She just happens to have really, really good horses. And so I can study for this, and they don't need to go be champions if they don't want to be. But so the only pressure I have is pressure on me. And so it's like a training experiment in a way. It's like, can I take this knowledge and can I apply it? And can I take what the old guys wrote and prove it? Like, because I could talk a lot, but the thing about the dead guys, somebody said, if I had to start out like where I'm at now and come up with a name for myself, it'd be horsemanship from old dead guys. Old dead guy horsemanship. But the thing is they could prove it. It's not every old dead guy, but it's like they're historical figures that prove this riding, and they're not all that far off from one another.
Sure.
over a couple hundred. But anyway, so I'm not interested in a big show career anymore. At the same time, there's horses I want to get on more than others, right?
Yes, sir.
Because you just they give, you're like, oh, this is so cool. And you know, whatever. It's just like having a horse. If you put it in a like cow horse, you know, sliding, stopping, I mean, the horse would just drag his ass. I mean, it's kind of fun. And, you know, you'd kind of rather get on that one than you would the other one in the barn, who's a good horse. Yeah, I mean, to be honest. But anyway, I just like horse training, right? So that's where I'm at, and I don't really want to bullshit people anymore. And so I'm a little, talk about pet peeves. I'm taken aback almost by the pomposity of some of the Facebook warriors who just, you know, they're presenting themselves like classical trainers, especially the Vaquero guys. And I've learned enough. I go, you don't know what you're talking about, and you can't show it. And I've seen them try and show it, you know. But anyway, who am I? That's why when you wanted to interview me and stuff, I'm like, I'm nobody.
No,
you know,
no,
I don't have any big, huge. I got that snaffle bit buckle on, I swear. But I think it'd be cool if I had got one of these horses to a real upper level. And I did have these retired stallions, and they were trained at Grand Prix level. They also won Masters Division of Working Equitation. They taught me a lot. I showed one, but and that was only a year and a half ago. And I got to admit, I didn't know what I was doing with this horse. He knew more than me. So they could tee off, they could passage, they could do tempi changes. I didn't exactly know how to ask for it, but worse than that, I didn't know how it was trained. I didn't know the background, the building blocks that got that horse that way. And if you don't know it, you'll ruin it, right? It's like, and if like horses that are a little bit out of shape, you have to kind of go through in a shortened version, you know, so to maintain the training. But anyway, it would be cool if I could take one of these horses I'm riding now and keep them long enough, say 2 or 3 years from now, that I could go. There's talk of going of the Americans having a team that they could actually take horses to Europe and compete, say, against the Portuguese. That's a tall order, because those guys have been doing it a long time. But to understand,
you either lose or you learn, right? You go take a licking, but your eyes are open now to what is possible out there. So
from champ to chump, that's what they say.
Well, that you bring up a few points I wanted to question you about. So we were talking about the all-around sort of horses, and to my mind, at least the world I'm aware of, there's kind of 3 big camps of that. In the English world, you've got the 3-day eventing, and in the Western world, you've got the rein cow horse. So they're going to do the 3-day eventing horse is going to do stadium jumping, dressage, and then a cross-country course. The rein cow horse is going to do cutting, kind of reining, and then the cow work down the fence. And
3 events, yeah.
And then you've also got working equitation, which you could kind of say is in the middle. It's not exactly English. It's not exactly Western. It's that Doma Vaquero connection in there. And you've got your 3 events in there, the speed test, the obstacle course, and then the dressage. So you've done 2 of the 3 of the big 3 all around sort of disciplines out there. So I don't know if you ever thought of it that way or not, but you're kind of solidly on jack of all trades territory, I would say, and I mean that in a respectful way. I don't mean that as condescending at all. So
I just heard the other day that a jack of all trades is another way of saying ADHD.
Yeah, I resemble that comment just a little bit.
So, I never did compete eventing, and I saw my ex-wife and my daughter's an event, and she's doing really well, and she's down in Temecula, Galway Downs right now, so she's worked with big name trainers. But when she was little, my wife was jumping and eventing, and I was more interested in the cow horse. I missed my opportunity, and I did a little bit of jumping, but I missed my opportunity to really appreciate what a horseman it takes to be a good jumper. And, back to the military riding in these big European schools, you had to learn to jump. It was part of it. It was never like straight dressage unless you were the exhibition circus trainers, which I don't say circus in a bad way, but like Boucher, people always bring up his name.
Yes.
Or even, I don't know if Nuno ever jumped horses, Nuno Oliveira, but it's so well-rounded. And, and I used to poo-poo the little foo-foo saddles. And that's like, no, these people are sticky. And you watch a good jumping rider like start a colt, if they know, I mean, that you talk about cowboys out bucking one out, and they're in a little jumping saddle.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a whole new appreciation because they're skilled and they're trained. I mean, they go to school to learn how to do this. And what we I don't know, read it on Facebook. I don't know.
I got to tell you too, there's a hell of a lot of difference between a horse that's 14-2 bucking and a horse that's 17-2.
Absolutely.
Bucking. Those big suckers, their buck is like a wave in the Pacific Ocean. It is freaking huge, whether it looks like it or not. So yeah,
I don't think a warm blood could buck. In fact, I broke my collarbone 2 years ago on a little shit. But anyway, my daughter likes the thoroughbreds, so she's jumping the thoroughbreds, and they're smaller than a lot of eventers with thoroughbred, but there's some kind of warm blood crosses in there. And in fact, she had talk about bloodline. She had Anglo Arabs in there. We could talk about, okay. See, my brain gets triggered. I get like free association.
ADHD. There you go. Yep.
You have to bear with me, but it's my ADHD. But the Arabians, we talk about cow-bred horse, like the cutting horse and all the cutting horse bloodlines. I swear to God, I've had some Arabians that were as cowy, if not more cowy, than any quarter horse ever rode. They work a little different. Their body's different, genetics, but you train them, and Bob Ingersoll, a lot of those guys back, Dick Knight, back the old guys from 70s and 80s in cow horse, they were training multiple breeds.
Mm-hmm.
One guy paints, there's some awesome paint horses that were finalists at the futurity, but they weren't afraid to show an Arab. There were a lot of Arabians, half Arabians, working cows, and Bob Ingersoll, 6-time winner of the Snaffle Bet futurity, that's where I run into him and got help from him, was at the Arabian shows. He had this little Arab mare called Mariah Berry Bay, and there was just something about Bobby's style that I just loved. But anyway, he was about correct, and he knew that horse wasn't going to go to Ren Cow Horse show and be competitive. But in the Arab world, it could. But he was still. It had to read its cow. It had to stop right. It had to operate right. So fortunately, I was more influenced by him than a lot of the gadget trainers.
Yeah. I tell you what, I grew up, I cut my teeth on cutting horses with as much cow and the high bloodlines and all that stuff. I bought a Shetland pony for my kids, and that thing was as cowy as any futurity prospect I have ever thrown a leg over in my life. She was absolutely ate up with, to the point where I couldn't turn her loose near cows, or she would just go free work the damn things, and it would be I'd have to go rescue some. So you never know. On the old masters, I just wanted to ask you this, because there's another dichotomy there. So I've read a lot of that stuff as well, and it is pretty, like when you read Boucher and some of these others, Paton, there's certainly genius there, and it's very evident how educated and in this they were. But there's also that sentence every once in a while that you come across and you're like, oh no, that's not right. We know better than that now. And there are some things that we have learned. I always pick on Xenophon about this, the oldest of the old masters, but in the art of horsemanship, there's a quote that I paraphrase, and basically he says, for a lazy horse, get a friend to tie a mean cat to the end of a long pole and shove it up between your horse's back legs.
That was Grissom, or that was an Italian, I think. I don't think that was Xenophon. But I know what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah. Tie a really angry cat in a sack to a pole. Right, and then stick it up that horse's ass or something. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And he'll go. Yes.
So there.
Yeah, I don't wonder if were they serious. I always thought that was from another. Doesn't matter.
I'm 100% sure that is from Xenophon and the Art of Horsemanship. I quoted it in my bit DVD.
Thing is, people have hijacked a lot, because what I know about Xenophon, he wasn't the colt breaker. Was what was that guy's name? Because he had another guy that did most of the horse training. He was a military strategist and leader, and he trained guys to die in battle horseback. I mean,
yes,
and he appreciated the horse, but he wasn't the main. So they've sort of hijacked some of. They've turned it into, what's the expression you hear a lot? It was at him about the dancing. You wouldn't force or anything force can't be beautiful, or
yes, yeah.
Was that Xenophon?
I am not 100% sure. I believe I know what you're talking about. And that's also, we're talking texts that are 2,500 years old. So who the hell knows what the reality of who said what.
You've got translation. Yeah. You've got translation issues, but
yeah,
look at some of the bits. I mean, they're in the book. Some of these bits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk about woke horsemanship. They'd never. I mean,
yeah,
people wouldn't. So it is a dichotomy, because it's odd that how glorified they'll make one guy, but then if they look at the bits he used or something, it doesn't fit their outlook on horsemanship, and they'd go.
Yeah.
So, but to your point, there are a lot of things you have to ignore. There's some pages you have to flip through to get. So I've had some guidance in this, where read this guy, but don't read the whole thing. Read this chapter.
Yeah.
Then read this other chapter. Because then they get off on their own, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so
it's like hunting for gold. You're looking for nuggets here and there throughout. And just because they're
so
wrong,
you could tie it into. Yeah. But yeah, Xenophon, I don't know a lot about him, but I do know he was a military leader, and this was military shit, and I don't think it's as near, they always use those beautiful quotes,
I
as if he went out in moonlight, danced with horses.
He wrote most of those books in his 20s too, I believe. He was quite young, and so that's one of the things he was noted for, is his ascension to military general and all. He was an Alexander the Great type who did that all very young. And I might have had the gumption to write a book in my 20s, but I sure wouldn't want anybody to read it now that I'm in my 40s.
I'll pay you to burn that book. Yeah. I sure wish I could remember the name of his colt of this colt breaker guy. Anyway, well, and Boucher, what's interesting is, okay, so people say, oh, the ultimate of French classical, but he was from the circus. He wasn't military, I don't believe.
No, so you're
and
right.
I don't mean circus in a bad way, but it was more exhibition riding, and he was a genius. At the same time, before what they call his second band, you could argue that he spent the first half of his life ruining horses.
He would argue
if you read
that.
Philip,
yeah,
these guys that were his contemporaries, they go, this is like, it's like they're talking about the P word. PP, they just go, do not go there. It's horrible. And there's a book by Phyllis that he spends an entire chapter ripping Boucher up one side the other, while still giving him credit for being kind of a genius.
Mhm.
But this, and so Boucher, he's got to almost get a chandelier fell on him or something, hurt his legs. He had to change his whole deal. So he spends half his life going, and this is the deal. And then the other half of life, he goes, never mind.
Yeah.
It's hands without legs, legs without hands, but there's not a lot of forward riding in it. And we don't, we have films of Nuno Oliveira riding, but we don't have any of that guy.
Yes.
But I've read enough criticism of it. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not going to, he probably had feet of clay too. And so, I don't go too crazy over the Boucher stuff.
One of my favorite quotes is that tradition is for feeding the fire, not for worshiping the ashes. So there's a lot of us that need to kind of think of it that way a little bit. A guy can be a genius. Tradition is for feeding the fire, not for worshiping the ashes.
Oh, I like that. That's a good one.
There's a lot of us that could stand for that. And really, like Boucher, you almost have to give the man even more credit for having the ability to recognize that he was wrong and change. How many of us would not have the ego to recognize that we're wrong and verbally say, I was wrong, and now I'm going to change direction and try to improve? How many people double down on wrong?
Yeah, I actually don't have, I haven't read anything of his. I just read the history of him. And so when people talk about him, it's like, you've got to know what part are they talking. They're usually talking about the second manner, right?
Yes.
But then you read these old texts and what these guys thought of him and what he was just over. It's like trapped between their horse's legs where in these flexions and even though Phyllis talks about flexions, so there had to be an influence of Boucher, but Phyllis's flexions were all forward. And the biggest criticism is of Boucher before, I guess, is the horses didn't go forward. Everything he did was just contracted into place. There was no forward riding. It was I don't know. That's what he says.
Yeah, he started riding at the standstill. He was literally doing work without moving at all. So yes, sir. Well, Jim, I don't mean to interrupt.
So he went for between. Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, are we running out of time? I told you I could talk.
No. I was just gonna do the sponsor of the episode, but go ahead and finish what you were saying.
Oh, sponsor the episode. Go ahead. Do your thing. What are you gonna do?
Okay. Well, this episode is sponsored by Dr. Elmer's Equine Vet Clinic, Crematorium, and Taxidermy Studio. At Dr. Elmer's Equine Vet Clinic, we won't waste your time or money on new age expensive treatments that may or may not work. If Underwoods won't heal it, or a gallon of oil in their belly won't treat it, he's a goner anyway, and you're just running up a bill on the inevitable. That's why we've expanded our operation to include the first equine-sized crematorium in our area. You can't bury a horse with the stuff we use to put them down for fear of water contamination. So we put the gas to them. Did you know that your 1,200-pound horse can be returned to you in a feed bucket-sized pail? We've even begun incorporating the ashes into concrete structures of art. You've watched cowbirds ride your horse around the pasture for years. Now watch birds continue to appreciate your horse in a custom concrete bird bath containing Old Thunder's remains. If that isn't appealing to you, we've also brought in an award-winning taxidermist from Arkansas. Believe us, those boys from Arkansas know a thing or two about mounting dead animals. So you can have Thunder in the living room and don't even have to worry about him making a mess forever. Dr. Elmer is a sixth-generation large animal pro, and like the previous generations, he's creative on the realities of dead horses and how to take your horse's remains and have them remain useful. Dr. Elmer's Equine Vet, Crematorium, and Taxidermy. Any which way this goes, you'll get your horse back. All right. So that's a new sponsor to the show.
I think you're Mr. Calling. You should be a TikTok influencer.
Oh, God.
I could just see you dressed up as Dr. Elmer with the that's pretty good stuff there.
I hope I'm more competent at life than TikTok influencer, but anyway, well, I like to crack a joke here and there. Anyway, well,
I like your. Okay, go ahead.
We were talking about the old masters, and I know you have this pet peeve about some of the Facebook trainers and groups, and I'm gonna take the leash off of you in just a second and let you run on that. But I wanted to pass an idea that a friend of mine. Are you familiar with a classical dressage guy named Patrick King?
Yeah.
Okay, so Patrick and I,
but not personal.
Well, he and I are pretty good friends, and he was on the podcast a little while ago, and he brought up something I've never really talked about, but and I don't know if this is true for you, but he and I both happen to have scars on our calves on the inside of our legs from years and years of riding horses, and your boots wear on you and so on and so forth. So sort of his idea was, before you can become a famous horse trainer on the internet, you need to show your scars. And if you haven't been riding long enough to have them, then you need to shut the hell up until you can kind of prove your bona fides with your calf scars. So I'll just give you that thought, and then you can turn loose.
I'm not supposed to show you my scars.
No.
Yeah.
You're good.
You're not gonna make me.
No.
That could be it.
Yeah, there's a reason you don't see most of us in shorts very often, for sure. Our legs are not underwear model worthy anymore. But you had some particular thoughts on some of the Facebook groups, and also I'll let you go ahead and say your piece on that.
Did I already talk about the adjectives, for one thing? Horsemanship, that everybody, of course, you got to advertise, but trying to make some money. But I mean, these adjectives that are describing horsemanship are just getting so out of hand. And some of them are 3 or 4 words long. Responsive, intuitive, delicate, harmonious, God, even transcendental. I mean, you name it. They just. If I hear one more adjective about, it's like, how come we're not all talking the same language? How come we're not all, if we're all training the work, aside from our individual, context or discipline, in general, we should be talking about the same language, but what happens on Facebook, and I know a lot of these guys, and some of them they're good writers, but did I already say the cross between Yoda and Kamala Harris? I mean, they're descriptions of something, and I've actually been blocked a couple of times because I got kind of, maybe I deserved it, but there was something about a description it was just a leg yield, and this description of the leg yield was just the energy created by and it was about the faults. Where people have trouble with the leg yield is that they don't understand that when they overbend the neck, which is true, then the energy does this and that, and you're not the true. It just went on and I'm going, okay, a leg yield's a leg yield, a leg yield. It's been described a gazillion times. There's nothing magical about it. And I can pick up 5, and I did it once. I've got copies somewhere from 5 different textbooks: German, French, English, and even in cavalry textbooks that describe a leg yield exactly the same. So why not just say that? But like I say, when I pulled it out and I quoted it, you just learned from books. And I'm like, well, where am I supposed to? I mean, am I supposed to just learn word of mouth and trust everybody? I know how to do a leg yield, but somebody taught me how to do it. They said, this is how you do a leg yield. There wasn't a lot of different, and here's another ideas that there's plenty of Facebook ideas of what's wrong. But somebody told me this and I don't know if it's completely true about the FBI, but it was about the counterfeit division. When they teach people how to spot a counterfeit bill, they don't give them counterfeit bills. They teach them everything they need to know about a real bill. You get completely familiar with the real thing. Then you can spot the counterfeit. So it does no good to describe counterfeit after counterfeit after counterfeit. You haven't taught anybody what the real thing is. But it's very easy to act like a preacher on Facebook and take something as simple as a leg yield and turn it into the wrong thing that everyone does is this. Well, that's not helpful. But why do you have to act like you've discovered the key to the leg yield? Because it's in every freaking book ever, and there's 4-H kids who can do it. And yet you're giving this glory. You sound like Yoda. Like how pompous is that? And they accuse me of being arrogant because I said, look here, and I quoted some of these books. Oh, you just exposed yourself because you got it out of a book. And I'm just like, oh my God. So I got to talk like that too. And I'm guilty of it too, but you come up with these. I got to read this too, because it's my spoof on what this sounds like, and I'll read you one because I'm too chicken to put it. I thought I'd put it on Facebook and see if anybody took the bait.
I think you have put a couple of these, like almost like my sponsor. You've had a few couple paragraphs of a little mockery going on there. I'm pretty sure I've read that a time or two for your stuff.
I don't know why I wasn't brave enough. God, I hope I should have tagged this because I can't remember it. Oh, here it is. So here's just one. So picture this. I'm gonna put this photograph of me, say, on a horse, or maybe there's just beautiful background of horses all bridled up, and I've got the spade bit on and whatever. You must balance the horse on the scales of balance in order for balance to find equilibrium with empathy. And I mean, what did I say? This is a complete gibberish, right? But I swear people would go, oh, gosh.
It's profound.
Jim, that's so profound. But I also did some more funny ones. With the horse, we must seek to become one, else we become number two. Pretty good.
I like that. Yep.
Or the horse is a mirror into your soul, but you can't comb your hair in it. That was pretty funny. And I got one more. The horse teaches us to teach him so he can teach us what it is to learn how to teach. This is what these guys sound like. And they just rapid fire put these things out. And I got to stop doing it because that one guy bugged so much about it. Because I go, what? Who's your crowd? Because this is laughable shit, right?
Yes.
And so that's what's wrong with the Facebook thing in a nutshell. And people, I mean, I got one on my horsemanship page that I'm a little embarrassed about because I put a picture of myself on a horse in a field with cows, and it said, but see, I did this several years ago, and it says, feel is the moment between something that's about to happen. Feel is recognizing the moments between something that's about to happen and something that's not happened yet. I thought it was a pretty good description of feel. But again, I'm so up. Somebody said, you're a little high on yourself, aren't you? And I went, oh, yeah. And they brought me down because you're a little bit too enamored of your own glorious descriptions.
Sometimes you
really
have,
just.
I use the voice recorder on my phone, and I know there are times where I will be driving or something, and I'll have this thought that I think is just in the moment I'm in. It's perfect and it's profound, and I'll record it. You listen to it 2 days later, and you're just going, "What in the hell was I talking about? Like that makes no sense." In the moment, it was brilliant. 2 days later, what was, I must have been dehydrated at that moment or whatever.
I just think we need to be real about what horse training is and not make it that, not put a bunch of adjectives in front of it, because it, like, you're separating yourself out from, and so much of it's groundwork. I mean, I'm all for good horsemanship, and a lot of it's not bad, but it's like, don't be so full of yourself. There's like, I used one. There's some I can't even remember. It was like 3 words long. Intrinsic and holistic approach to comprehensive. I mean, it just went on and on and on. Horsemanship. Like, what do you actually do? And then they show something quite common, and or it's all ground. It's like, where's the riding? And so how do you recognize? So here's the deal, going back to the counterfeit deal, is I want to be able to recognize good riding, know who to emulate and who to not emulate, and then practice it myself and demonstrate it and prove it somehow. And so but with one of these Lusitanos, I went, it's in a lower level, but I was just thinking, this is the riding, this is what I got. It takes a lot of, I'm kind of being trained. I've never been trained in my life with these Zoom lessons. And somebody can contact me if they're interested in this person. But this is all in my mind while I ride. And I marked like a 73.75 in the dressage test, which I've never marked in my life. But I was able to, and not that they're the end all of discussion, but there are some rewards. And it's like that judge said years ago about pornography. He goes, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. Yes, I don't know how to describe it, but I know it when I see it. And so that would be like the epitome of any recognition I want, is just have the horse show it. And it's like the lead changes through the slalom pole in Working Equitation, which little kids 12 years old are doing in Portugal on trained horses. But you've seen the videos.
Yeah.
These guys it's just effortless. And I'm like, God, if you could look like, who do I want to emulate?
There was a video that came up not long ago, and it's a little girl opening a gate, and that horse does 2 strides of the lope, opening a gate. I'll kiss your ass if 0.1% of the adults in the United States could lope a horse under control for 2 strides while opening a gate. I mean, there's just.
So, there's some training and thought, and there's some stuff behind that. And we just need to know what to look at. And the Facebook thing, people are looking at the wrong people. They're making heroes of people of their feet or clay. And a part of me, part of me should, just walk away. And the other part of me wants to take an axe to the bottom of their feet and knock them down. That's, because I see their students, and it's a little bit like we were talking before with the PP. If you ever get those students to you, you've got to deprogram them, right? It's like they've been to a cult, and there's more of it. There's, in some circles, I don't want to name names, but really top clinicians that I actually respect. So it's not them, but it shows up in their students. It's like it's an ism. They've turned their horsemanship into an ism, and they're just repeating garbage. And they okay, show me what you're talking about, and they can.
Yep.
But they also, well, so and so says. And you mentioned it earlier when we were talking privately. I think they're even now doing that with Ray Hunt. They're in other words, they never saw Ray Hunt. They never were. They're actually ascribing more values to him than, not that he doesn't deserve, but they're turning it into an ism.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew Ray personally, not Talsy Walsy, but I did do some private work for him, and I followed him around over a period of 20 years to different clinics, talked privately with him. And he was like, I'll tell you Ray Hunt's story that sort of epitomizes this. So, okay, talk about the bridle horse deal. So we had Ray come to our place. We did like three or four clinics. and one of them was cowboy. And there was a horse in my barn that was for sale that I had started trained. I had less than a year on. And he was kind of a neat horse, but I had him in a snaffle hackamore. And the guy wanted to buy him, but he wanted to see, is he in a bridle? They pack a bridle. So I thought, well, I haven't put a bridle on him yet. I haven't done that. He said, well, because it was part of the clinic. And I said, well, I'll ride him in the clinic. And we did a little herd work. So I had this quick bit. And it was like a correction bit thing. The quick bits. They're kind of neat old bits. Mm-hmm. And it was an old one. And for some reason, it was all I had of it. I go, well, I'll stick this in its mouth. And I did put like Ramel reins on. But I had a lot on this horse, and he was cowing. So I come in there and I work this cow in this bit because I mostly want to show that this horse could be ridden one-handed, Ramel rein, and he'd kind of bridle up and work too. And he worked good. Then I stopped and I felt sheepish because I had to go, Ray, don't look at the bit. I go, I really apologize. This is just this piece of crap bit. It's not, and he went, Jim, that horse works better in that bit than these guys in those spade bits thinking that they're working something. He wanted to see how a horse worked. And he didn't care. He goes, whatever you got in that horse's mouth is working for him. And this would be, the bridle horse guy, they'd tear it off my wall, or they'd find me, or whatever they do. They'd send me to prison. I don't know.
I think they'd crease your hat. I think they'd crease it right up. Yeah, no flat hat for you anymore. Yes, sir.
No flat hat for me. But that was from Ray, and he just liked to see a good horse work. And Ray liked cutters. He goes, what he did was these guys had the best stock in the world. And these horses were such good horses, they would give them 110%. And these guys wanted 150, 200%. That's what his criticism. That was his big criticism. He goes, God, these horses, I don't know how they keep trying for these guys. But he sure liked the cut. He sure liked a cow horse, Okay. So, so he was, and he showed, and he evidently, before my time, or I knew him, he had that horse Hondo, which kicked everybody's ass at the cow pass, but so anyway, but that's my Ray Hunt story about bits, because I remember just thinking, okay, I got to fess up. Don't look at I apologize, Ray. This is, and like I've just affronted the master or something.
Well, he could watch your dressage horse go and appreciate it, right? And they sure weren't using the same tack he was using. So the masters always recognize the good. So a couple of things that you brought up there. When you were talking earlier about some of the definitions, someone takes this real complicated deal and you read it and you go, oh, hell, they're talking about a leg yield. That stuff has gotten so bad with me that when I have people send me questions and stuff now, before I even try to answer their question, I respond with, now, when you say this, do you really mean this? Or do you have one of these other 9 definitions? Like, let's define the terms to make sure that the question I answer is really the question you ask.
They got some picture in their mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I will, if it's a bit question, I don't care what you tell me the bit is, send me a picture. Because I have had, like Tom Thumb, I've probably had 20 different incantations of what they think a Tom Thumb is, and they ask me a question about it, and then when they send me the picture, I'm like, that's not a Tom Thumb. That's this. So the names have gotten so convoluted of a lot of this basic stuff that you just can't trust it anymore.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's one of my
the DVD you sent me of your bit thing. I know you changed the title. You called it a little bit of knowledge.
It was more than a bit of knowledge. Yeah, it was the original.
And I loaned it. I watched it, loaned it. So that was a lot of information.
Well,
and really well researched. And then your jokes I just picture you're tied to the post and foaming at the mouth and all this. It was funny. But I don't know. Was that successful?
It hasn't been commercially successful. It's been
No.
very well reviewed and all of that. We've actually got it in about 25 different U.S. universities in the Equine Sciences and Studies program as part of their teaching resources. But as far as selling copies, I have not. I don't know whether it's too long or too expensive or exactly what it is, but it has not. I haven't broken even on it. I'm about halfway to breaking even.
Well, even then, you got people that argue with it. So,
Well,
right.
I don't get many. I mean, I think the way we present it is pretty hard to argue with. You have to be off of the rational, logical train if you're gonna.
Well, and also, like
but,
you said, I've had that discussion about the Tom Thumb because that is like it's a catch-all phrase for a bunch of different bits that are not what they first called a Tom Thumb, from what I understand.
A Tom Thumb is a very specific design with certain criteria, and if it doesn't fit those criteria, it's not a Tom Thumb anymore. Now it's some other, version.
See, you could get accused of being too dogmatic. Well, and this is what you mentioned dogma earlier, and that's a criticism if you're too, like I get from too book learned. But the thing is, there are certain definitions that we need to stick by. Otherwise, nobody knows what we're talking about. And it's whatever you feel. Or you say, I mean, picking, canter departs or lead changes. And I mean, how many different descriptions people have of this? And some of them are just absolutely wacky. Well, here's what I do. Well, isn't there here's what it is or something, I mean, they think if you say believe it or not, there are actually rules to riding, that there are a few that we should follow. And I think it's been well established, but people even then think, well, not necessarily. And I know it all depends, but that's more about each individual horse. Like you can't say, do this exactly and you get that. So, but there's, I mean, I'll give you my speech about this. It's class. There are 4 natural aids: the voice, the seat, which is seat weight, hands, and legs. Did I say 5? Well, seat weight is seat/weight.
Balance. Yes.
That's just like universal. People think it's like this is unenlightened horsemanship, but if you say that these are what's available to us when we're working with the horse. We only have so many things. In the beginning, voice might disappear later, but voice, hands, seat, and legs. That's a part of our.
Where does soul connection come in on that list, Jim?
The soul connection.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Now I want later when we come up with the inspirations in the middle of the night. I mean, the emotional responses we get from when all this works, those are real things, but you get that afterwards. You can't start there. You can't start with I've got this mental connection. Now it's all going to work because you're untrained. There's actually ways to use your hands, to use the reins, and put a bit in a horse's mouth and understand why it's in there. But use of the legs, use of the seat, and these things have been like the leg yield. They've been described ad nauseum. We don't need that much elaboration on it. But to me, it was like enlightening. It's like, how did I not know that? Right. So
it becomes a form of egotistical masturbation. You get these horses sometimes where someone has decided that they know better than all of this stuff and they need their own set of cues. I'm going to teach this horse to do a lead departure on the inside leg rather than the outside leg. And we're going to not act like they all have 4 legs and have to move in a certain way or they fall down. We're just going to divine a whole new thing. And it just becomes its own It's egotistical masturbation. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that.
You were talking. I wrote this down a minute ago, and I just thought this was funny, so I was going to share it. The other day, I was on Facebook, and I came across like 3 or 4 posts, all within the same little evening of scrolling, that were talking about taking into account the whole horse, and I just put a little burr under my saddle. So I went and wrote a post, and basically it was I don't think I'm smart enough to do this whole horse stuff that everybody's doing. So I'm going to become a specialized expert. And if you want to know about the little wrinkle on the back of the
wrinkle
elbow,
in the elbow,
that's
yes,
my territory.
I remember. That was great. I was right there with that. Yeah, I think I made a comment on
that. As if everyone training horses has completely not noticed that they have personalities and fears and strengths and weaknesses, and never thought that maybe we should take all of those things into account while we're trying to get the most out of this animal. It's just so absurd.
Nobody ever thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, thank God we've got the new age mindfulness. So someone finally took the whole horse into account.
Okay, but on that same line, how many times? So, okay, you could get it's that wrinkle. God darn it. Daniel was, I mean, this changed everything for me. It's that wrinkle. And but they're doing this with the thoracic sling. How many times have you, it's a thoracic sling? You have to understand the thoracic sling, or you have to understand, they even go, I mean, I get the tongue release and hyoid bone and all that, but I mean, they get so far, that's it. It's just like your wrinkle. It's the thoracic sling. That's what we're training. Or when you get to collection, how many times have you heard this? It's all about getting the horse to lift his back. Now, I'm going to say nothing could be further from the truth. That lifting the back has nothing to do with collection. And I'm going to get shot for it. But the collection comes from the power of the hind end and the stifle, the horse, even the thoracic sling, the horse driving from back to front. Talk about dogma. If they're going to crucify me because I repeated back to front, and now I sound like a dressage queen, but it's true. When the horse is finally actually sitting, then the back kind of does lift. If the horse is ridden forward and uphill, he does lift his front, his thoracic sling gets involved. But did these old guys not? They didn't know what a thoracic sling was. They didn't have that anatomy. How did they do it if they didn't know what the thoracic sling was? But this idea that we're going to physically cause, like the horse bends in the middle and that causes his hind end to come underneath him. It's you can historically prove this isn't right, but they say, well, the horse has to get round. But I mean, again, I'm sounding like the wrinkle, but it does come from the ass end, just like your cutting horse getting his ass end in the ground and being able to turn. The back lifting and the thoracic lifting is a result of all of that. It's the end product of all of that. It's not how it's created. So we don't sit there, I'm going to lift his thoracic sling and I'm going to teach collection. It's just not, I don't know if you remember those commercials, this old gal sitting in a room when Facebook was still coming up. She had all these pictures on her wall in the living room. And she's sitting there and her other neighbor comes up, what are you doing? She goes, well, this is my wall. I'm putting things on my wall. Thinking Facebook. And the gal goes, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And that's what it makes me think about so now I've seen there's even clinics, discover the thoracic sling. And now we got, I mean, again, I get blasphemous about it. I understand the release of the jaw. And these guys knew, I mean, that's kind of a Boucher thing, but they knew when a horse here's how simple it is. You clench your teeth, clench your jaw. You don't operate very. You don't see very many runners and athletes. I'm going to do this, the clenched jaw. It relaxes the whole body, but they're going as far as saying that they can take a dead horse and pull on the tongue and his hind end will move. Now, there's people that swear they've seen the video, and I've seen the video. Well, it's somebody at the other end. They're trying to show, look, when you take a hold of the tongue, because of the hyoid bone, it restricts the hind end, and we can prove it because look, I can't move it. Now I can move it. Well, I've seen magic acts. I mean, come on, give me a freaking break. If that were the case, because the idea of the flexions or this tight tongue is the fact that the horse emotionally, like we get upset, we clench our teeth, and it's hard. Like one guy showed me, and it was a Portuguese guy who studied Boucher and all this. He goes, clench your teeth and wiggle your fingers. It's like hard to do until you train yourself. You can't do it. You got to relax your jaw and you can wiggle your fingers. It's more neurological, psychological. It's just what happens to the system in the body, but it's not like there's a tendon that's attached to the tongue through the hyoid bone that goes to the hind leg that we can go because then you've totally eliminated the emotional aspect of the training, that what a tight, like a hurt mouth or a tight jaw does to the training. It's because the horse is uncomfortable, so he's not going to work, and his hind end's not going to work. You can't get him.
They need to take the whole horse into account, right?
Otherwise, let's just tie a string around the horse's tongue and make us. And why do we need? We'll just go like this, and his hind end will go like this. It's preposterous, but there's going on and on. So it's just like your wrinkle. But that was funny, but it's actually kind of hurt because this is what's happening.
Funny because it's true. Yes.
It's the elbow wrinkle. I got it. Daniel was right. If I could just access that wrinkle, my horse is going to be freaking brilliant.
A couple of things that all brought up. As a guy that started a whole lot of colts, I can tell you that if you get on a horse and you feel a lifted back, that's not a good sign. That means he's fixing to buck your ass off.
Yeah, there's something that's going to happen after that. Yes.
You will learn the thing that happens before what happens, right?
Yes. It's one of the last thing you want. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things that's always, this is like one of my pet peeves, and I just bang this drum at every chance I get, but the rise of the clinicians has brought up one of the most harmful things I think we've ever added into our groundwork and our warm-ups, and that is the obsessive disengaging of the hindquarters. And I will go to my grave on this hill if I have to, but I hear all the time about if you're going to stop a horse from bucking, disengage the hindquarters. Well, let me show you some video from a rodeo of a bucking horse, and you might notice that his hindquarters are doing a whole lot of moving. They're pretty free when he's bucking like hell. It's his front end that winds up getting locked up. If you watch the front end, it doesn't move very much. The hindquarters are moving a whole lot. So freeing up the hindquarters is in no way, shape, or form a ticket out of a bronc ride. It's not going to help you there at all. And so I always want to say that every chance I get. One of the things, I think you had done a post not long ago, and I meant to look it up and I ran out of time before we started, but it was basically kind of like my little wrinkle thing. You were talking about there not being a posture for a horse to get into, that there were a lot of different postures. And I don't know if that's what you were meaning kind of with the lifted back, because there is a point in a stride where the horse will lift its back, but it isn't lifted the entire time. The horse doesn't go around round. Otherwise that's crow hopping. It would just be a little pogo stick.
It look like a hog.
Boing, 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 right?
Go around like a pig.
Yeah. So the lifting of the back is a consequence of the driving of the hindquarters, and it's a part of the way the horse moves through a posture in a stride, but it isn't something we would want to freeze.
That may have been from some other source and not something I wrote. I don't remember. I agree with it anyway. I mean, we can't put horses in particular postures.
Yes, sir. I think
but what is true, yeah, I don't know what I wrote about that, if it was recent, because sometimes I go back 2 years to shit I wrote. Can I take this off the internet? Yeah, it's a little about like the Boucher thing. Never mind. Yeah, never mind. I'm on to a whole new deal. Forget what I said. But you talk about, okay, is this point in a stride? Yeah, because And I put a picture, it's from Harry Bolt's book, of the horses on the circle. I don't know if I have time to, like, I usually have it bookmarked, but it shows horses from an aerial view. It's the same horse and a trot circle, a circle. You can clearly see from above the bend of the horse in the spine. And the point was what you can see. So the horse is at a trot, and there's enough angle that you can see that when the inside diagonal, no, it'd be the outside diagonal, but the inner hind is coming forward. So stifle's advanced, the rib cages go out. When he gets on the other diagonal, and he's on the inside diagonal, and that stifle advances, the rib cage goes in. Mm-hmm. It's the stifle moving up into the horse's belly that kind of moves that rib cage. So it's the same with like both stifles, like at the canter. And this is where the lifting the back, it just happens. If a horse is up in the back, it's not very much anyway. But it happens from the hind end. I couldn't find it. There's some great pictures well, for instance, these photos. This is one of those books. I don't know if you can see that. Mm-hmm. So that is what is he doing here? Ronverse, tail to the wall. But you can see the bend in the horse's spine. You can see the kind of degree of bend. And you can see it in these still photos here.
Yeah.
So this stuff is invaluable because there's a Vaquero horse guys going, oh, I'm doing basic dressage. And then they say, here's a shoulder in. And you're like, that is not a shoulder in. And why can't we go, look, here's a freaking shoulder in, or this is Ronder's tail in. That's what it looks like. And this is what it looks like and so quit fucking this up. Oh, here's haunches in. Right. And
we also have a tendency to act like the horse has consistent flexion through his spine from his pole to his butt, and he doesn't. There's way more movement in the neck. In the thoracic area, it bends, but very little, and in the lumbar area, even less. And of course, the sacral vertebrae are fused, and there's no bend there whatsoever.
Exactly, and that's what these photos really show. Mm-hmm. If I could find them. Oh, here it is. The circle one. It's great. You can't see it probably through the thing, but if you can draw a line through, and it's a buckskin or a dun or something, there's a line, and you can see through the line so clearly. So, and you can kind of see by the shadow. This is the same horse, by the way. One person went, how'd they ever get all those horses to go around so evenly? It's a composite photo, but you can clearly see, if you can see close enough, that when that inside hind, the rib cage is out, but then it straightens out as he gets on the other diagonal. And there's moments where from the tail to right behind the rider's butt is really straight. Mm-hmm. So this idea of a rigid line, but the books, they some of it's in translation, but I don't think they actually meant that there was an even bend. I think they just say you need a bend. And for all practical purposes, it feels even. So it's sort of one of those things. But if you really break it down, but what happens is people take that and they've written this line. Some of the books do that, and there's some of the even cowboy dressage stuff. They show this is what, and they show this arced line. And I just want to go, it's not real. That's not what if you really want to be real, get one of these. It's a great book with the photographs. Incidentally, I've been told don't follow his actual instructions, some of them. Okay. But I mean, you want to get blown. I mean, this stuff is kind of fun to me because we don't operate like this. Where's he's got these diagrams of I should have been more prepared. Throughout the book, we talk about instructions. I mean, he's laid it out. These are your legs actively. Those are your seat bones. These are your hands. So that might be a half halt when he shows this is a containing outer leg but not active or something. There's a there's a
Yeah.
table of contents, and it's really helpful. So, and he's got it through the series of lead changes. And yeah, there's different ways to do it, but if you want to train your horse consistently, you do have to have a method. And the thing is cavalry riding, if they were, everybody had to ride those horses in the military. And you had to, so all those horses had to have a consistency through their training. It was, well, that horse, you have to like lift it, no, it's like left leg, right leg, left, and they were trained the same. So everybody could ride that horse. And now we've got all this stuff where you got to read a novel to figure out, or the trainer's the only guy. Here's another bunch of diagrams.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty interesting. I put that much thought into it, but there's no reason we can't have the same in the Western riding.
Yes,
and you talk to cutters. You mentioned you're cutting. Who can argue with rate, stop, and turn? Doesn't every cutter in the world, they can say, what does a cutting horse have to do? Rate, stop, and turn. Right? It's just like, it's unarguable. How, I don't like my cow horse to rate the cow. And I don't like him to stop, and I don't like him to turn. But if you're teaching right, you've probably taught people to cut. And like a guy say, you could teach a dozen cutters it takes to train 2 cow horses. Because, you go around and then you put them on a cow, but it's pretty much, there's little wrinkles to that. But basically, they got to go across the pen, read their cow, get stopped, and get turned.
Yeah. I can tell you, as a 2-year-old guy, that was predominantly what I did in the cutting world. People would be shocked how often some of those big time competition horses go back to the 2-year-old guy for a week or two, because they got too far away from rate, stop, and turn, and that horse needed to be brought back to the foundation of what he was doing, because they blew him the hell up. That stuff happens.
There's that quote from that German philosopher or poet that said how important it was to do the simple things perfectly. Mm-hmm. Then you could do the complicated things easy.
Yeah,
something like that.
This might be a Yoda-ism, but I really do like this one. It is that beginning riders want to work on intermediate horsemanship, intermediate riders want to work on advanced horsemanship, and advanced riders work on mastering basic horsemanship.
Yeah.
And I have learned as a clinician, you don't ever advertise a clinic as basic horsemanship, because no rider out there,
nobody will show up,
believes that they need to understand and further work on basic horsemanship. One of the tests I do, I'll get my group in a semicircle and I'll say, ride your horse forward 7 steps and stop on the 7th step. And for years, I never had more than 2 out of 12 people actually be able to stop their horse on the 7th step at a walk. Just recently this year, I had 3. That's the first time I've ever had that. And it's humbling. If you think you're hot shit, show me you can walk forward 7 steps and stop on the 7th step. And historically, 90% of you cannot do that. Now, let's work on basic horsemanship.
That's what this is what Ray did in his horsemanship classes. I don't know if you ever did one with Ray.
No, I did not.
He taught people to count the feet. He'd stand there and have you walk by all 4 feet, but you start, say, with the left front. And he wanted you to count as they picked them up, not as like a mark, not as you put them down. Mm-hmm. So it was left, 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 left. Now, and then you could then it was the hind, which was harder. But he'd help you if you go by. If you had, he'd count for you, so you'd get the feel. You could find, like right before that horse's hind foot's going to step, it drops in a hole. There's a little at the very end of its stride, so you get a feel of that in your ass. And the idea was you knew where your horse's feet were, but he did the exercise. Walk ahead 5 steps, stop the 5th. And what that did was give people a lot of feel, because it's 1, 2, 3, but it's like, get ready. You got to slow the 4th one down so you can stop the 5th one. So there's a lot of preparatory feel that goes. You can't just because you know this if you're teaching this, they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then they try to stop it, which is why they can't stop on the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's right. Am I right?
Yeah, I tell them like if you're approaching a red light in your truck, you don't wait till you get to the line before you touch the brake, right? I mean,
and that was a Tom Dorancism too, which was you took a feel of the horse's feet, you slowed this foot down so you could stop this foot. And that was the basics. And as far as the basics thing, people would say, because Ray horsemanship classes were always the same, and you never did, it was always the same exercises, and it was kind of boring and very little loping because then it was a shit show. He said, "You guys look like worms in a can," that's what he'd say. But he'd have other, clinicians and stuff say, "Ray, do you have an advanced horsemanship class?" And he goes, "No, because you guys can't pass my beginning horsemanship class." And he said that to Buck Brannon. I mean, when Buck wrote it, he goes, it's like when you guys can actually pass my horsemanship class, and it was just like you said. So there's, the basics, but that's where all the feel and the feet and all that stuff come from. So
I find too, you talk about some of the whole horse and the elbow wrinkle, there's kind of a pushback against being mechanical. And I understand that to a degree, because like there's a science aspect and there's an art aspect. But like you're talking about the reining horse and teaching one that's not talented how to stop. If you can't feel the feet, there's only one spot in the sequence of movements of the feet where that horse can actually stop correctly. And if you don't know where that spot is and you can't time with it, you're fixing to teach him to bounce off the ground like a rock skipping across a lake. And that's what most people do. And so, there's art, but there is a mechanical aspect to this that you cannot avoid. If you don't know that a lead departure begins with the outside hind, you can't feel the outside hind and you can't set it up. Your lead departures, at best, you're going to be lucky once in a while, and at worst, you're going to really screw a horse up.
Hey, you got a 50-50. It's a 50-50 chance, right?
Yep, absolutely. Oh, one of the things
you can always say your counter, Kevin.
One of the things that brought up to mind too, I've seen this a bunch, where I'll get a customer to come to a clinic and they've ridden with another clinician a bunch of times, and that clinician may have only said one phrase to them during the clinic, and they took that home and they worked on it for the next 2 years, and then they show up at the next one and they really, really overdid something. And I'm like, he said that to you, but he just meant for the next 5 minutes that you needed to improve this a little bit. And then you were ready to progress beyond it. So there's kind of a double-edged sword there.
Not disengaging the hindquarters.
I mean, that's one of them. Let's go do that 90,000 times and then wonder why we can't get our horse to take the correct lead anymore, because you taught him never to bear weight on the outside hind, which is, by the way, a pretty important concept in everything you're ever going to want to do with a horse, So, okay.
And it doesn't mean that at that moment, it's like, that there's a safety issue where, talk about if a horse is bucking, taking his head, if he's already bucking, but that's how they teach people to take their head and bend them before they that was right, so you don't get killed. Mm-hmm. Like you got half a chance of shutting this thing down before it turns into something.
Yep.
If you can feel it.
Yeah.
But you didn't Ray and his older horses, I never once saw him do a hind end disengagement.
Mm-hmm.
And they say Tom never did it.
Yeah. What you're trying to do is get the horse to relax his back. But if his back is tight and you kick him in the flank, odds are relaxation is not the result, right? So anyway.
There's no catch-all. It's the wrinkle. I'm telling you.
There you go. Well, let's two other topics I definitely wanted to get into with you. I guess the first one, let's just say mules. You train mules exclusively there for a pretty good while.
For a while, yeah.
what's kind of your take? Is there a difference? If so, what is the difference? I really like Ray or Tom. I don't know which gets credited with this, but the saying of they're just like a horse, only more so. I like that a lot. I think that pretty much applies, but I haven't ridden tons and tons of mules. So what's your thoughts?
Well, I know this, that maybe if they're just like a horse or more so, if they have a brace in them, if they brace their neck, if they brace any part of them, you you could take a hold of a horse and maybe get that brace out. And the mule's like the master brace. So if he has a mind to stiffen up and not let you bend his neck, for instance, or give his jaw or anything, you're sort of screwed. They are, but again, it's breeding, because some of the mules had a thoroughbred mule, a thoroughbred mare that was completely bendable and nice and raised well. But you get those more stocky mules, and I mean, I'm not talking mentally what they're like. I'm just talking about their ability to stiffen and just go no is pretty strong, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't go at it head on. It's like, yeah, good luck with that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So you got to take this circuitous route to get them to soften or do something, and so they can be difficult that way. Yeah, I'm not as interested in riding them anymore, but I made some good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the people say, I'm looking for a trail horse. I need this horse that can go. I go ride some really hairy places, and I need this horse that's not going to put a foot wrong, and he's going to take care of me, and I don't have to worry about it. What they're talking about is a mule. They're too proud to ride a mule. You've heard that. Anybody ride a mule too cheap to buy a horse and too proud to ride a cow.
I've never heard that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. But the truth is, the mules have such that quality that what they're talking about is they need to be riding a mule in the mountains, and all of those issues are taken care of, because when they're good, they're flawlessly good. When they're bad, they're flawlessly bad. I mean, you know what I mean? It's
like, I have to say, I have a distinct memory. We have a lot of hog hunting around here, and that tends to be you're chasing hogs with dogs and get in some pretty rough country and real thick woods and stuff like that. And that we had a customer that was an avowed mule man, and he wanted mules for his hogs and all. And I probably broke a half a dozen of them for him. But I could distinctly remember one, and that whole deal about them being sure-footed with that one, that was the hell out of the window. This thing would fall down with you in a heart. Yeah. I mean, she was as uncoordinated, so yeah. There's always those exceptions out there, right?
They're all over the map, but I had one that was just this leggy, beautiful mule. He was in the bridle, and he worked a cow, and he was great. He topped the sale at Red Bluff when I took 2 mules to the Red Bluff Bull and Gelding sale. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's big time in California. It's ancient, it's iconic sale. They opened it up to mules back in the 80s. And I took these 2 mules, and you got to demonstrate ahead of time. And that was another Ray Hunt story, because there was a prop. For some reason, maybe Ray was doing clinic nearby. He showed up at the sale, and I had to do it. You got to preview your horse, work a cow, rope it, whatever you get. So the mule was pretty good at cow work, so I worked a mule. That mule freaking got a standing ovation. Ray was like, it was the biggest compliment. I can't remember what he said, but he goes, that's a damn good mule, basically. Mm-hmm. So they can be phenomenal, but like you say, there's no set, like, sure-footed. No, they fall down just like any of them. But when you do get a good one, they will be They remember shit, smart stuff, but they did come from a horse. They come from a mare, so it's pretty important. The
What kind
mare,
of
I
mare
don't
you
think the
have?
donkey. Yeah, I don't think the donkey's near as important as the mare. And I'm not a mule expert, but that was my. And I broke some kind of feral ones. I got funny stories about that. I took them to a sale. One of them half killed me, but one, a Mexican kid, fell, a little black mule. She was almost like Paso Fino-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Had his head come up like this. And if you just went in a straight line in a circle, she was okay. But so I sold that one to him, and I took to Mule Day sale. And this mule was treacherous. And I mean, you couldn't really cheek it up to get on because it wouldn't let you bend its neck. Somehow I got it through maybe some evil ways. I don't know. I got it broke to ride, but it was going to be a pack. I got it gentle enough to anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But you go reach up, put your foot in that stirrup. That thing,
yeah.
And you're like, oh shit. Well, anyway, so I'm out on the track, and people are watching it because they know they're looking to buy it. And I had to tell people, will he be good for my kids? No, do not buy this. Anyway, so the mule grabbed his ass and ran off on the track. But back in those days, and I was a little braver rider, but I just let him go because they don't go very far. So then that come from my sort of Ray Hunt thing of breaking colts,
Mm-hmm.
So off he went. Instead of getting a tug of war with him, I just let him go. And so he takes off, but he kind of had a pretty way of going. So he's loping around there, and they're like, God darn, look how good Jim's got that mule going. The sucker was absolutely running off. If I picked up the reins, I had nothing. But you just sit there like, he's pretty nice. Anyway.
Loping around on the slack rein, yeah.
And then somebody, loping around on slack rein. Yeah, so
my sort of take on them is that I like them fine. They just take a lot more time. Like I could make 5 horses in the time it's going to take me to make 1 mule, and I'm not sure what I get in exchange for all that extra. I'd rather have the 4 other horses, So,
I just and up in the mountains, I rode a mule and packed horses, but I had some good mules, So I've had the good ones. I've had, and boy, when it comes to driving, I worked for a guy named George Chamberlain, who had, he taught 8-ups, and movies hired him to put these teams together. But so mules are good, but I like riding these Lusitanos. I wouldn't, if you had a mule tied up but I don't know. If they said he was good, I'd get on him, I guess.
Yeah. I guess the last topic I wanted to broach with you was about the California Vaquero stuff and the spade bits and all of that. I won't say I've got a bone to pick with the group. I think it's kind of like everything else. About 5% of the people that are claiming to be it are actually pretty good at it, and maybe 95% are blowing some hot air. I don't know that I have found many groups that have as much dogma associated with, and to a point where it's just I believe this to be true. I can't defend it, I can't articulate it, I can't tell you why, I can't break it down, I can't do any of those things. It's just that this must be true. And so I've had some run-ins with some of those guys over, and you're aware of what I'm talking about. So within that tradition, what is your take on what the tradition is? Kind of the start to finish. The snaffles belong there.
Well,
does it take 10 years? What do you think?
No, I think it was, like I said, when I was riding horses, late 70s in California, that was the equipment you used. Everything was in Rommel reins. It was no big deal. What we called bridle horses were just working horses. They packed a bridle. We didn't pretend they were, I'm riding we didn't like suddenly our voice lower 2 octaves and when we said bridle horse, right? And we didn't genuflect when we just, and for one thing, one of the requirements were they better stop and turn around and work a cow.
Yes.
That's kind of agreed on that they got to be your kind of ranch horse, but there was no magical element to it. It was kind of neat, cool that when you read the history that come out of California, and supposedly nobody else had the spade bits and the art that went into the spade, and it's pretty equipment. We like the headstalls and the silver and the gear, and it's really cool, and a horse packs well and looks cool, but there was no like it was just horse training. There was
Yeah.
and it's what's interesting about it. It's California. That's true. Come out of the California, the mission era, but mostly what we know. For instance, there's Arnold Rojas, but I don't know why we give it such glorification because the way they started, I don't think we could stomach the way they started horses, for one thing.
Yeah.
And there's pictures there in Morris's book. I think I mentioned that of laying a horse down and beating him on the neck with the stick to tender up his neck so he'd really respond to that neck.
Yeah.
And the whole thing of the trigger rein horse, this was true, but that was written by a sailor, a guy who wanted a round the world cruise. He hopped on, who was that guy? 2 years before the mast, who wrote that book. He hopped on a schooner in England and wanted to spend 2 years sailing around the world. They come all around the Horn, South America, and come up, and they come into San Francisco Bay, Monterey at the time, whatever it was, and he sees his first. He's an Englishman. He sees his first Vaquero guy, and they're working cow, and this horse is just he called it. He didn't know what else to call it. He said lightning rein. Well, that stuck. Now that's what the term everybody uses. But that's all we know what they look like. You see the pictures of roping grizzly bears in their saddles. I mean, I think these guys are half crazy. And I don't think, and I don't know, they said, well, they come from the Spanish tradition of, it's such a pointless argument. Like, I don't even want to discuss it because it's just horse training. There's nothing to be all. And now, I mean, I'm happy with the snaffle. But I've done the whole thing. I've done the hackamore. I've just for an experiment, and I've trained several. No snaffle at all. Hackamore, 2-rein, straight up. And I've done it in the snaffle, and it's like it's just you can do it either way. I don't understand the purity thing. So I'm with you. I think they glorify the vaqueros to stuff they don't earn glorifying. And then there's certain guy, I can't tell you his name, but he's teaching the people. He's decided after examining the spade bit, with all this, the way it balances, that's the way, this is classical riding. And you do this and you do this. Then if you want to, he's like made up this stuff, and he's got these students riding around doing this goofy shit. And there's one thing you see in all the pictures of the old vaqueros, the paintings and stuff. These guys rode straight up. They're like this. Their horses, they look proud and straight up and do all this goofy shit.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. It's like, it's pretty when you see a horse packing a spade, but it doesn't have to be a spade. And look at the rein cow horse. They're still using that equipment, at least. You can criticize their speed training techniques, but they do have older horses. I mean, and they're packing that bridle and working uphill and stopping, and it's.
Well,
I don't know why they.
Yeah, I talked with Richard Winters a couple of these interviews ago, and he was talking about like the snaffle bit futurities at the end of the 3-year-old year. Well, there's not a horse in that barn that isn't regularly being worked in a shank bit. They show them in the snaffle bit, but just like the spade bits, it doesn't mean that was what that horse rode in every day this week at home.
Well, like I said, the tent. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is something I've been picking on in the non-vaquero world for a long time. You'll have certain trainers. I guess this goes with the whole horse stuff and the definitions, but you need a D-ring snaffle at this stage of the game, and so on and so forth. I have made this challenge a bunch of times, and I've never had anybody take me up on it. If I bridled your horse and I put a bag over his mouth so you couldn't see what snaffle was in his mouth, and then I handed you the reins and I said, go take a 5-minute spin. Now tell me that you could tell me whether it's an egg butt or a D ring or what. I mean, there's no way. You're not going to be able to do that. The same thing with the vaqueros. They want the balance and the buttons, and it needs to be exactly this number of chain links to balance this horse correctly. Once again, let me take my knife to your romals and cut a few buttons off and change the chain links, and let's put a bag over where you can't see any of that stuff, and I'll kiss your ass if you can get on him and tell me whether I shortened them or lengthened them, or if I changed anything at all. It just gets into this whole it's perpetuating the mystery and elevating the complexity of it to a degree that is so far beyond reality. It's just not even funny.
I agree with you.
I certainly agree there's a lot to the balance of a bit, but it's not that infinitesimal that it makes this major difference if you're a half a gram off here or there or whatever. It just
I don't think so. And it's a little bit like the people say, I just use your seat or the bridle. Will I ride my horse? Every bridleless horse I've ever seen, and I've had some that could do a whole bridle. They were trained in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they learned in equipment, and then they became so good at it. Look, I don't need this bridle. There's very few that were trained correctly.
Without,
and then the 10-year thing. Okay, in 10 years, what do you have to show for it? You say you took all this time to do this, and I know people like this. They can't change leads. They can't even actually pick up a lope from a standstill. I mean, I think you ought to be able to achieve a few benchmarks in training in 10 years. Have a little more than just, look, it's just so delicate.
Or why is it virtuous? That's also a horse we rode. We not only rode him 10 years, we rode him 12 hours a day. How many hours do you need to teach a horse to change leads? And where's the virtue in that taking 10,000 hours rather than 1,000 hours or whatever the hell the difference there might be? Wouldn't we say a reasonable benchmark is if we didn't overly stress the horse and we got this done in a shorter period of time? Isn't that a reasonable way of discriminating and saying one method is better than another? If it takes longer for no difference, where's the virtue? And I do want to say here too, I am not against the vaquero tradition or spade bits or hackamores or any of that. I am simply against the bullshit of it. The realities of it, I'm totally on board with. I think spades are great. I think the balance that they can create in a horse is great. I just think there's a whole lot of bullshit that carries into the conversation.
It's undeniable, and it's actually quite frustrating. And it creates a lot of those, like you say, those pages on Facebook are like some of the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to enter a lot. Now I'm like, okay, I can't even go there. But and then when I did, I got blocked, got kicked out because they didn't want to hear it. Yeah. They want to hear, like I said, I'm gonna tell you the truth. But some of the guys so well respected, looked up to the master of it all, and it's like it's embarrassing because his writing is embarrassing to me. But anyway, yeah, I like a good one. I've got my own personal horse, packs a bridle pretty good, and I did the whole spade. Then I decided that she actually worked a lot better in a little San Joaquin mouthpiece. Whether that was because I was crude, whatever, but she has a pretty narrow mouth, and that spade would tend to, if at the wrong time, but that little San Joaquin's a little more forgiving. And I don't mind the idea of leverage, and I don't mind the idea of, the signal thing. I mean, it's as if you can't have work your horse with the rein slopping in the breeze, you're not doing it right. So how do you, when you're teaching this young horse, do you ever pick up your reins? I mean,
well, so that's one of those things. Like, I think you were talking earlier about the similarities and appreciation of the working equitation horses that the California guys appreciate. Well, one of the major differences is that those horses are generally ridden bridled up, that there's rein contact or pretty darn close to it. Yeah. But in the California deal, just like you're saying, you're supposed to have this 9 feet of slack between you and the horse. And
if you can pull it off, I'll tip my hat to you.
Yeah. I completely agree with what you were saying earlier about the bridle of this horse. Like that's pretty much my perspective on teaching people about bits, is go about it in a functional way that makes logical sense and graduate your horse through bits successfully rather than failing your way through them. I do bridleless horse demonstrations too, and I do it exactly like you're saying. I graduate that horse up through to a point where he no longer needs the bit. He respects my seat enough that that's my holding him back point.
Well, he's also trained.
Yeah. And it didn't take 10 years most of the time.
But go figure, you actually have to train them,
And I'll just, while I'm bashing on this too, I think a hell of a lot of horses don't like a cricket. I think there's a lot of horses that are annoyed shitless by that thing, and they're worrying themselves with it rather than working the jaw and all. I do a lot of reading body language and breaking stuff down, and I think that almost becomes like an oral fixation.
You're not the only one in that excessive.
Yeah.
Like, it's not good. It's anxiety.
Yeah.
A little bit, it's kind of cool to hear like they'll swallow. So that cricket will go clink, clink, whether they like it or not. But the copper in there that might, but those horses that is not music. And I agree with you. If they go. Yeah. And I got one Lusitano who's that way. Talk about losing your what do you
mouth seal?
The mouth seal. And he gets some foam going, and but it's anxiety. It's not good. But he had some bad training, and their deal was drop noseband, flash, tight cabins.
Yeah.
It makes it worse.
For sure.
And I've loosened this up enough where finally this horse, like if there's a day and he's only got a little bit of, looks like a little chapstick, I feel like I've accomplished something. But he's also one of those, he just goes, fluffy, 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 fluffy. If he's standing still, it's got to be moving. I don't know what to do about that. So I don't worry. But it is true what you said about it's the air that causes, when you did your demo and your DVD with the toothpaste, the more they lose, and I can see him sometimes when he's good, he's quiet. He kind of like when they drink, I kind of see their tongue, they get that little seal. So yeah, there's a lot of that they need to have some foam. That's a good sign, and they're working that cricket. But taken to an extreme, I agree with you. It does aesthetic. All the California bits, it's one of the requirements. They have to have a cricket in it. It's I think the Rankauer's rules.
It is, yes, sir.
But I just think, but a lot of those they don't go around constantly. But
I'm really big on trying to teach people to learn to feel the horse swallow, because if he isn't swallowing, he's not working his tongue, and it's that tension, like you're locked jaw. I'm totally on board with Boucher and that sort of stuff. They need to be swallowing, and so a cricket gives you an audible signal that he just did that. But if he's doing that, sir,
a dead horse can't swallow.
Right.
I'm just going to put that out there.
But I mean, if he's doing that 87 times a minute, that's not good. That is anxiety. He's bothered by something.
No, if he was a human, he'd be a smoker.
Yeah.
He'd be tapping his foot in the ground and chain smoking.
So and I kind of wonder, I've seen some horses that had audio triggers. Like I'm a big deal on, I don't know if you're using rawhide lariats, but starting colts, I've seen a lot of colts that would have no problem with me swinging a rope above my head. But if I feed slack into it real quick, where it does that little zzz sound that it makes, that sound would bother me.
Oh, yeah.
So they might, it wasn't
your Hondo, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the movement that they didn't have a problem with the movement. They had a problem with the sound. And so I think the cricket can kind of be that way too. If it wasn't making noise, they might not be rolling it enough, but they're sitting there trying to figure out what the hell is this thing that keeps making this sound. And it just becomes like a little kid. You gave him bubble gum and 10 minutes later you're telling him to stop popping bubbles. It became the annoying thing that causes all of the other stuff.
Well, there's one more thing along the subject of misinformation and stuff, is that we're trying, the thing about the bridle horse, we see these horses, with that classic look. We seem to start there, and we're riding young horses. Is what they, in the snaffle, all bridled up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we start at the front end and work our way back. We're making the young horse look like he's a finished horse. And then we dumb down the finished horses where they should be doing like tempi changes. And they're doing the same thing they were doing as 3-year-olds. It's kind of backwards.
Yes, sir.
And the Portuguese, okay, everybody, they go like a bridle horse, like you said, with contact. They're also using, well, now you're the bit guy. I call it a Portuguese pelham because that's what they call it. It's basically it's a Portuguese pelham. Maybe there's another word for it, but it is there's a place for a second rein at the cannon bar, and it's a low port, but it's also got the leverage portion, and that's their bit of choice. They ride double bridles too, so they're not worried about whether they've done it California way because they're Portuguese. Yes. But you can't always complain, compare the two. But I know people, a pelham, oh my God, you're blasphemy. And the Vaquero police are going to come down. Yeah. I like right now, most of the work I'm doing in snaffle. I'm using it in a different way, and I'm not trying to. The problem with it, because some of these horses are older, so guys, they put them in a pelham and they curl too much behind the bit, and you get little bitty steps. You can't get them forward, right? Their neck gets too short. Their shoulder starts moving. So it's like, put them in a snaffle, and I don't mind a horse even taking a little hold of the snaffle. If he takes all that slack out of the rein and then that's it, he's like, and I can ride from back to front through his body and get him loose and I throw that snaffle out in front of him like the carrot on the stick, or like you're getting a dog to chase a ball. And you can get, they talk about long and low. Instead of riding on that contact, this is the stuff I'm learning that's like the real dressage, supposedly. And it's nothing like everybody said, these guys, they're amateurs that are saying, drive the horse into the bit and let it, no, you're tossing that. He follows the bit. It's very light. It talks about all the lightness we would talk about in anything we want in our horse. It's a little bit different way of looking at it. And it's kind of like, because what do we do when we lose? We drop, get your head down and in. And that's where I've heard that. Well, get your horse's head down and in. And that's not collection, but it'll lead to collection one day. And that's like actually not true.
That's one of my least favorite things to fix. Yeah.
It ruins the front of the horse. And we're in too much of a hurry. If I could criticize our Western riding to make the horse look like an older horse. And he's got the look, so it's easy to fake it. And I've done it myself. But when they're not working from behind, so
yes,
now it sounds like a dressage But
From my point of view, what I think you might be talking about when you're talking about the Portuguese pilum is like an Argentine cheek. Does that sound familiar to you? Where it's going to have a ring at the cannon, like you're talking about, where you could attach a two rein. One of the issues I have with a pilum,
I don't have one here. Go ahead.
Well, one of the issues I have is anytime you have a straight cheek bit, and this is anytime. So a pilum, a tom thumb, and even in the Vaquero world, a Las Cruces cheek. Anytime you have a perfectly straight cheek, if that horse is trained enough to respond to the bit, that bit will balance on the vertical. And so if the horse is honoring the bit, they're going to come to the vertical, which is all well and good until you handle the horse. And as soon as you have to take the slack out of the reins and handle the horse, once again, if he honors the bit, he's behind the vertical and into that over postured area that you're talking about. I think the straight cheek bits are very, very difficult to ride a horse in and get a correct posture. When you get a little more of, like, I'm going to use the word just because most people understand it, but like a grazing bit that has some sweep to the shank, that will balance where the horse will be nose in front of the vertical a little bit. And then if you need to collect him up and take the slack of the reins, you might bring him to the vertical, but he won't automatically come behind it, if that makes sense. Like I view the Las Cruces as a parade bit. And this is one of those areas I've butted heads with some of the Vaquero guys. But
I know. Yeah, I know.
Oh.
Well, and again, I don't understand all the physics like you do in an engineering sense. But I just watch the horse. I mean, the training should go, and if they're comfortable in that bit, they've maybe they're overcoming the physics of it, or the bit's not in their way.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's definite, like I was experimenting with. I should be riding this horse in a double bridle, but I want to show the working equitation as an American rider, and we don't have in working equitation all over in Europe. You ride in the attire and equipment of your country. Okay, so that's clear with the Portuguese. And in France, there's a lot of dressage saddles or jumping saddles they do it in. What is the national attire of riding in America?
That's uniquely ours. Yeah, yes, I agree.
Yeah, well, the only thing that you could think of is Western, because otherwise it's English. Mm-hmm. But we don't really have one. So, but I'm trying. They say if we ever put together a team, an international team, we're going to we have to solve that problem, and everybody's got to show up in the same equipment. And I'm trying to keep it Western, but I found there's another, heaven forbid, I moved out of my Wade saddles into I've got an old association tree saddle that it's as close to the, because my dressage saddle is pretty nice, but not like Patrick King. This doesn't, because I know him. He went dressage, but he does a good job, and he has no problem with the clothes and the saddle and the equipment. And I still got a little hangout. But you can't show. I can't show my Western saddle and my chaps and blanket and my wild rag and the cowboy hat with the double bridle. They won't accept it. There's not actually a rule. So I'm conflicted right now, because these horses would actually go back. I've experimented with the double bridle because anyway. But that little port, so they ride the two. I've ridden double bridle at this horse with the Portuguese bit. Let's just call it a Portuguese bit. But those horses are so easy to get behind the vertical. Mm-hmm. And my score, and then I thought I was being collected. And it was like, he's got this great walk. And when I did the dressage test, the walk, I got a 5 or a 6. And then when I walked and left the arena, and there was another dressage judge that going there, that's your 8. Where was that walk? And it's because he was out and free in front of him.
Yes.
nose out, and
Yeah.
I learned because I thought, boy, look at Mr. Portuguese here, and he's just behind, and his little hind legs are taking these itty bitty steps. They're not working. So, yeah. Anyway, so
I
bits
think
are
that,
important.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's one of those things. Straight cheeked bits are highly overrated. They're very difficult to manage, and they have to be on the utmost trained horse that you're not going to touch at all.
Like
If you're,
Las Cruces too, generally that shank is, well, it's the same 5 inches or what is it?
I mean, it'll depend. That's one of like the
Most of those
Santa.
California bits have the same size from the cannonbar to the rein attachment is about 5 inches, aren't they? Most of them.
It'll depend. I've measured a bunch of them. A Las Cruces, for whatever reason, does tend to be longer most of the time, where like a Santa Barbara will tend to be a little shorter. That's not always true. You can find overlap through them, but that changes the leverage ratio. And I know that's a dirty word in that world, but the leverage ratio, whether you're actually enacting the curb chain or not, the leverage plays into the quickness of the bit and the balance of it. They are still levers. I mean, it's absolutely, it's part of what I think is harmful within that group is when we make leverage a
The
dirty
denial.
word, yeah, we don't study what leverage means. And when we don't understand that bit has leverage and it's still subject to the laws of physics, then okay.
Can you see that? That's the
yes,
Portuguese.
That's the Portuguese. So that's pretty similar to Argentine cheek. It's a
Some
little
are
more
shorter.
of an English version of it, I guess, but the similar characteristics.
Here's another one with really short. I don't know.
So that's more like the Pessoa cheek, where you've got multiple ring attachments to decide exactly where your rein is and how much leverage.
Well, you'd have that's your curb rein, and that's your. Actually, here's another. You're the bit expert. Technically, if it's straight bar with no leverage, it's a snaffle, right? Or is that old argument?
If it
doesn't have to be broke. It could be straight bar with no leverage, it's snaffle. You can call.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Snaffle is designed by the cheek, not by the mouthpiece. So it could have a port, It could have all kind of stuff and still be a snaffle.
So I still refer to, I'm using two reins because I call that, I don't know what else to call it, cannonbar, but it's the curb. But I've got a rein. There's no curb action at that point. I use, and that's my shorter rein.
Yes, you can't cause any rotation of the mouthpiece there, so that means there's no leverage. So it is essentially a snaffle rein.
That's what I'm after. But invariably, because it's so hard to loosen up. Anyway, I found that horses, sometimes I've used a straight bar bit, but like I say, I was just the opposite for so long. I trained a Lipizan once, and I think I ruined him because he never got his nose, because I went down and in right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And he would never really, he was very well trained, very well soft, pick up the bit. Wouldn't go forward. And I mean, right?
Yeah.
He's too well trained. He won't go into the bit at all. So you ruin his, and these guys told me, one guy is Portuguese, he had a little trouble with English. So he said, roundness kills the movement. And that was hard for me to grasp, but it was just his translation. He didn't mean, because roundness is a good thing, and when we think of, but he was talking about that neck. When they're like this, now that's interesting because if you criticize the Portuguese, God, they're often like way over tucked. And you've seen that. Now that's the Spanish, the Doma Vaquero. They tie the reins to the bit, do the Garocha pole. Their hands are free. But that horse is like his chin's on his chest. Yes. So I don't think I want that anyway. Anyway, that's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, but people go, I rode one of those Lusitanos, and the gal, she was from the Vaquero clinic guy. She goes, God, why don't you have him in Hackamore? He'd be a great Hackamore horse. And I went, well, because I don't want to. And I tried him in a Hackamore, and he was the shits. And it just meant nothing to him. And it was a horrible field. And I don't need to prove I've got a good Hackamore horse at home. So I know what one is. This one is not going to be one. You know,
No.
some horses have, we used to call it nose. Guys I work and said, oh, that horse got a lot of nose. And other horses put the hackamore on, they go like this. You know, there's a lot to this shit.
Yes, sir. And there's not ever one answer, right? Horses get to be individuals, and maybe this wasn't a good hackamore horse, but he will be a good bridle horse, and maybe he was a great hackamore horse, and he'll need the San Joaquin. He will not take the spade. We don't know until we get there, right? It just depends. So
And all the good bridle horse, man, I knew had a ton of different bits.
mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different spades. And
I really find like there's a big movement right now in bit fitting, and a lot of that is in the snaffle bits with the English horses. And I find it to be just the opposite. I can get almost any horse to go in almost any snaffle. Where they really become individuals and picky is when we get to the curb bits and those different mouthpieces. And that's where your horse is really going to tend to be more of an individual. But with the snaffles, I mean, they get into the 1 millimeter this and 1 millimeter that. I've never found a horse that really cared. It's when you get to those curb bit mouthpieces and all that horse is going to really decide he's different than the rest, you know. My experience anyway. But
well,
look, we've talked a good long time. I don't want to keep you too late, and my wife is giving me the flagging signal here over my computer. But I really do appreciate you coming on and having a chat with me. I've enjoyed this tremendously. I'll give you the last word. Is there anything else you'd like to say and leave the audience with before we go? What's your Yoda-ism for the day?
I don't have Yoda-ism. I just ride well. Learn to ride well. And there was an expression one of the old dead guys put is good riding is enough. Because you can't train a horse through bad riding. And so just figure out what good riding is, and don't listen to when it's out of whack. And so
good riding is hard enough too. That's enough of a challenge, isn't it? You see it seldom enough that apparently it is difficult. It doesn't require the fads and the perversions to try to retake ground. If you'll just get as good as they were, you will have done way more than most. I think we almost act like it has to be better. And good Lord, if you're just as good as what it was, then you will have done way more than most, for sure.
Yeah, we're not going to invent anything great. Caprilli invented something new and it stuck, but I don't know how much new we can get.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, this is kind of fun. I mean, you sit with a beer in a coffee shop and we'd never shut up because we're kind of just fellow nerds.
Absolutely.
And whether you use any of this or not, I don't care.
Oh no, we'll definitely use it. I don't, like I say, when we were having the private conversation for the first 20 minutes, I'll chop that part off, but the rest of it's all good. So.
There might be 5 or 10 minutes of something really important I said, but
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.